point. My last testimony was in front of Congressman Dornan's committee on the missing prisoners of war.
Right.
They had a Czech general there. And the Czech general his life had been threatened 3 times because he said these experiments come. And so Dornan asked me if I would appear and run interference for the general, appear before him and sit alongside of him, because I would add credibility to the general who they were trying to smear, because he was Czechoslovakian.
Yes.
And the man told a true story. And I confirmed what he said. It was true because I knew about those hospitals. I knew about those experiments. Now, it took a man like Dornan who had the nerve to get up there and hold a committee. And the families were there that day, too. They were waiting for me outside in the hallway when I came.
Yeah, there's one thing Dornan has. It's that kind of tenacity.
Yeah. And so it needs that kind of tenacity and somebody that will take it in spite of criticism. Because it's very simple. A newspaper reporter will say, well, this congressman is getting into a kooky subject. All right, some people maybe in his area where he gets votes will believe that. So why should they take the chance? I wish they would, but I doubt it. I know enough on it.
Remember, Art, there's a huge political downside. While Phil says he has not had a lot of overt criticism, that's because the book, I think, is fairly new and people are not directly threatened. If you elevate this to congressional hearings, you're now a direct threat. You know.
Well, that's what I was hoping for, John. Some sort of direct threat to a lie by omission. I mean, it's about time. If what the Colonel says is true, then he's our best connection to what really has occurred. And here's an interesting question for you, Colonel. If all of the technology that was gleaned from Roswell and any other crashes that have occurred, alien technology, had not been interwoven with American industry, where would we be today?
Well, I'll give you a little example. I had a file in one of my files, it was in the second drawer, which was called Project Rainbow.
Yes, sir.
This was von Neumann's. You remember John von Neumann?
Yes.
It was his project on artificial life. Now, I went through that file 2 or 3 times and I always put it away when I could have started an operation on that.
When you say artificial life, what do you mean?
By computer. They're starting to work on that now.
You're talking about artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, that's right.
You bet they're working on it.
It's artificial intelligence, the wrong word I gave you. Now, von Neumann, I didn't start that project. And a lot of people told me, well, it wasn't time because there were no supercomputers then. Now they can work on that, and they're working on it, artificial intelligence, because a supercomputer is available now, which wasn't available back then. So I think this is some of the developments that are coming up out of this, that new things can be taken, new developments may be taken from that craft. Maybe they can work in now what I said, that the being himself was part of the propulsion system, part of the UFO himself.
Well, that also is interesting because, Dr. Alexander, I'm sure you can confirm, we are beginning to work very seriously now on integration of pilots with our aircraft. They tell us, or I'm told, that there may come a time soon when a pilot will simply think commands for the aircraft. Is that ongoing research?
Well, Firefox is certainly ongoing. I think, however, the next step is to take the pilot out of the aircraft.
And have it be completely robotic.
Correct. What they're calling unmanned aerial vehicles or unmanned, unoccupied combat vehicles.
Well, that's really what the superintelligence did. They took what they were, or their people, out and put a robot or a humanoid in there.
Sounds more like a humanoid. In other words, half machine, half biological entity.
One day I was walking down the hall with General Trudeau, and I told him, General, I think that son of mine is a little bit crazy. He says the engines talk to him. The general stopped. He said, don't say that, Phil, because some people have certain relationships with engine and solid matter which we don't understand yet. Now, this was actually General Trudeau's words to me when I approached him on that subject. So a racing driver, at times he says he feels like he's part of the racer, of the engine, of the car he's driving.
Right.
You see, these things we don't know too well yet. We haven't lived. And I think that in the book where I say that the UFO was an electromagnetic thing, and the EB, or the extraterrestrial, was part of that aircraft, or that UFO.
An integral part of it.
He was a propulsion system, an integral part of it. This is what we're talking about now.
Do you think those bodies are still at Wright-Patterson?
No, because the lab said that they faded very fast. Their composition, I think we didn't study it enough, really. We should have. And that was partially I blame myself for, because I could have carried that on and I didn't do it.
In other words, the disposition of the bodies, that was in your hands, Colonel?
Well, I could have, at the time...
You could have followed up.
I could have followed it up and done something and made them study more with what they had before the things all deteriorated to the point where we couldn't work on them anymore or look at them.
The Air Force recently, of course, at the 50th anniversary of Roswell, or just prior to it, had a big news conference, and they disclaimed the whole thing once again. How did you react when you saw that, Colonel?
Well,
sadness.
I can't conceive what they're thinking. I can't conceive why they're doing that. It's beyond me. And it's like I told most of the newsmen, I wouldn't criticize the sister service. I followed them in Korea. I had a lot of friends in the Air Force, and I won't criticize them. And I told them, please, gentlemen, don't ask me to criticize. But their superiors, I can't even conceive or why they did something like this. And I made the statement, if I'd have done something like that, I think General Trudeau would have thrown me out the top window of the Pentagon.
We thought we were done, but Colonel Corso said, got to tell you about Albuquerque.
Yes, Art, this concerns you.
Me? Okay.
I went in the bookstore, and there was 300 people there. And they set up a microphone. I had to talk to them. And at least a dozen women came up to me and said they'd heard your show. And they said, and Art, well, he sounded happy, real happy and pleased. I told him, well, I'm going to let him know that. And then an elder woman came up to me. She was not in the line. And she had heard your show, and she said she was in her sick bed and got up out of her sick bed to come over and shake hands with me. And when she told me she got out of her sick bed, she was leaning over and I was sitting down, and I reached up and hugged her. And she kissed me in the cheek and started to cry. So I figured it was all worthwhile right there.
Colonel, I understand.
And she heard your show, too. And they praised you, Art, so I want you to know that.
Colonel,
I opened at Albuquerque at the bookstore.
Well, thank you. Where do you go from here?
I'm going home tomorrow.
Going home.
Sit in my easy chair for a while.
Well, it's an incredible thing that you have done, sir, for us, for our country, for the history books, and I personally want to thank you.
Well, thanks, and I think we're all part of it, so are you, Art. And I hope it works out, and I hope we keep making improvements and stay a great country. Some of the things we did there I haven't told you about that should be done, that they stopped us from doing. And sometime we'll talk about those, too.
All right, Colonel.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Art.
Thank you so much, and Dr. Alexander, thank you.
Okay, good night now.
Well,
good night.
You,
good night, gentlemen. There you have it, and I'm going to leave it up to you, ladies and gentlemen, to digest what you have just heard. Colonel Corso's an 82-year-old man. We have confirmed, Dr. Alexander has confirmed, and believe me, he has the resources to do that the colonel was exactly where he said he was, in the position he said he was in. And you've heard his story. What do you think? It's very hard to turn to anything that would seem more urgent, more important, of greater gravity than what you just heard. And what you just heard, if you listened carefully, was an honorable, simple man who acquired and worked with alien artifacts, saw himself alien bodies, and is saying exactly, in my opinion, what he believes to be true.